Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be an advocate for the animals and for the vegan movement? Have you ever given thought to what it would be like to go into a factory farm, into the slaughter area, and film what really goes on, and really put your emotions aside so that you can truly document the truth of the horrendous activities? Today's guest actually does just that. It was all by a fluke that Bobby Sudd happened upon an opportunity to go into a factory farm to film the reality of what goes on. And now it's his life's work. You're in for a treat as you learn the truth behind what goes on behind closed doors of the slaughterhouses, the factory farms, and so much more. So stick around.
Welcome to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show, where your host, Kathleen Gage, shines the spotlight on vegan and plant-based businesses and entrepreneurs from all walks of life committed to cruelty-free eating, healthy lifestyles, animal compassion, and the environment. Enjoy the show.
So, Bobby, normally I don't read somebody's credentials, but with you, I have to because you've got so many. You've been a vegan for quite a while, and you've done a lot for the animals. And some of your credentials and affiliations are LA Animal Save Movement, Humane League, Nation Earth Films, $1 Million Vegan Club. You're the organizer of the LA Animal Save Movement. You've done outreach with Save Squares, Anonymous for the Voiceless. Vigils have been LA Animal Save Movement. In film, you've been a cinematographer with the Nation Earth Films, which is Sean Monson of Earthlings. Was that an animal that I saw you move?
That was my cat. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, your cat's welcome to join us. Hey, anytime animals want to join, my dogs would join, but they're a little out of control. You've been, 3 years filming inside slaughterhouses and factory farms, and it goes on and on and on. I mean, I could spend an hour reading your credentials and your affiliations. And first of all, I have to say thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join me on the Vegan Visibility Show. And what I'd love to talk about, first of all, is how long you've been a vegan, what motivated you to go vegan, and what it is you do for the animals, factory farming, raising awareness, because the longer I do this, the more, like I told you, I think people are just being stupid for not paying attention. And I mean that sincerely because we're looking at floods. We're looking at a friend of mine, got flooded out of her home in New Jersey just today. South Tahoe is on fire, and on and on. So I'll stop and I'll turn it over to you. Share with us how you became a vegan.
How I became vegan and what got me to be, I guess, plant-based is kind of two different stories. In 2015, I weighed 290 pounds. I was type 2 diabetic, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, kidney disease, heart disease. And my brother, who's a plant-based nutritionist, asked me if I wanted to move to LA and adopt his plant-based lifestyle to, reverse disease and find happiness and health in my life again. And at the time, my dog had just passed away. I wasn't really enjoying I was living in Austin, which is where my brother and I are from. I was working in the film industry kind of, but I wasn't really enjoying it. So I didn't have an excuse to say no, at least not a good one. So I agreed. And then I moved to his place, which helped for me because it created a fail-proof environment, which is important. There was no opportunity for me to fail because there was nothing to fail with around. I didn't have any, it was all vegan, all plant-based everywhere I went. In 6 weeks, I reversed my type 2 diabetes. I lost over 100 pounds in a year. I reversed all chronic illness and disease. And that's how I went plant-based. Now, about a year after I started, I was with my brother at SoCal Veg Fest speaking. And a friend of his, Jean-Pierre, who's a nutritionist, plant-based nutritionist and lifestyle coach and trainer. He's been doing it for 30 years. He trains Joaquin Phoenix and Ellen and Emily Deschanel and lots of celebrities. And he told me about this pig vigil that his friend Sean Monson and his partner Amy Jean Davis were starting, and if I wanted to go. And I knew who Sean was because I was aspiring to be a documentary filmmaker. And he mentioned that Joaquin Phoenix would be there, and So I said yes because I wanted to meet these people. I didn't say yes for the right reasons, but it got me there. I mean, this is still the most profound experience for me, because this is when I went from being plant-based to being vegan. Was when, because I mean, other than speaking at SoCal Veg Fest, it was a normal day. It was just a regular day, and then the first truck with pigs came around the corner, and it brought with it the weight of its reality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd seen Earthlings, I'd seen other documentaries, and while they're important and they're impactful, all I had to do was turn off the screen, you know, and then separated by a great amount of distance and time from the event. The event that I'm watching on screen occurred years ago,
Right.
And it's easy to deny when all I have to do is turn it off and say, okay, well, that was bad, but you know, maybe it wasn't that bad. You know, you can say those things to yourself, but there it was. The truck pulls up and the truth is presented to me, and it's front and center, and it's undeniable. It's a full visceral experience. You can smell them, you can hear them, you can feel the heat coming off of their bodies. The air tastes different. I remember when that first truck with 200 6-month-old pigs pulled away into the slaughterhouse, I had the most profound experience or realization, at least in my adult life, that, you know, everyone here gets, I mean, I don't know what happens after we die. Maybe there's heaven, maybe there's afterlife. I don't know, but I like to work with what I do know.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do know is that everyone here, we get one chance to be here on this planet as the individuals that we are now. We all get one chance to experience and create as much connection and compassion and love and kindness as we can on this planet before our one chance is over. And as those pigs were pulling into the slaughterhouse, I realized that that was their one chance.
Mm.
You know, there will be 200 more pigs, but every single individual pig is never coming back. It was their one chance. And that was when it all switched for me then. It all became about animals after that.
You know, I had a similar experience, other than I've not been on a vigil yet, and I really want to. Jane Velez Mitchell, she suggested that I go on one, and I would love to find them, to be there, to do the next level of my own advocacy and activism. But I started plant-based eating almost 3 years ago to the day for health reasons. I was getting inflammation. I was 64 at the time and really experiencing some bad inflammation. And so I did a lot of research, and everything indicated if I gave up animal and dairy, I would probably be able to minimize it. Within 2 days, it was a marked change. And within a week, it was gone, and it hasn't come back. I've gotten rid of headaches, yada, yada, yada. But my big turning point, and initially I called myself plant-based because I didn't want to be a crazy vegan. I thought vegans were too radical. They, you know, the things that we see, the propaganda around veganism, that the negative side. And it was about 6 months into it. I was at the grocery store and I was walking by the meat department to go to another department. And as I'm walking, I had done a lot of research by this point. I had studied about factory farming, and it hadn't quite gone to my soul and my spirit yet. And as I'm walking by the meat department, all of a sudden, I just stopped in my tracks. Tears filled my eyes, and I felt what the pigs and the cows and the sheep and the goats and all of them go through. It was like I had same thing, a visceral response. And in that moment, I said, I'm a vegan. And I've not looked back. And, you know, as I look at more and more of what's going on in the world, when people say they eat healthy and yet they're eating a keto diet, or they're eating healthy and they've got chicken on their plate, there's more to health than just us. There's the health of the animals, there's the health of the planet, and obviously there's our health. But what can you say to people that are in such denial about the connection between animal cruelty and the violence in the world, and the, you know, because every animal that we abuse is permission to continue abusing at different levels, is what I believe to be true. So where do you find that people are really disconnected, and what can be done to help them to understand that simple changes can make a world of difference?
Well, you know, we're all born vegan because the human species were herbivores or frugivores. And human beings were born loving everything. You put an animal in front of us and we love it. Put a human being in front of us and we love them. We see all life is equal until someone tells us differently and we believe it. And animal agriculture, or eating animals, is the first form of discrimination that we're taught. That's important to remember, because as vegan activists, a lot of times we use words like evil or bad or wrong when talking about human beings that eat other animals. The truth is that the world isn't that binary. It's not just right and wrong, good and bad, evil and just. In fact, none of those actually go into their decision making on whether to eat meat or not. They do it. The vast majority of people, and there are outliers out there, but the vast majority of people eat animals because they believe they have to. They believe it's necessary. In their entire lives, they've been told by their parents that this is what you eat, drink milk, eat meat. Their doctors tell them that, experts tell them that, experts tell them things that they want to hear. So-called experts tell them, the keto diet, which has no long-term study, is good for you. And it's just reassurance. It's just reinforcement for bad habits. I tried dieting all the time when I was heavy, and dieting is just trying to find a way to cheat the system. It's that simple. It doesn't work. Obesity, diabetes, heart disease, these don't exist in non-human animals other than the ones that we've domesticated.
Right.
Because they eat a diet that is specific to them. And we're no different. We are another animal on this planet that has a diet specific to them. And that's a vegan diet. Unfortunately, we have created things like salty meat, right? Salt and fat in nature don't exist together. But these are two reward pathways in our brain that give us a dopamine response. And so you have two huge reward systems in fat and salt, because these are things you need to survive. You do. And we put them together, and it's overwhelming the amount of pleasure we get from it. It's so overwhelming. It's artificial, that you will not find that in nature. And so it creates this, there's a great book by Doug Lisle called The Pleasure Trap. And that's essentially what it is, And so it's hard, if you take someone who's 35 years old, they've had at least 35,000 meals in their lifetime. If they're not vegan, almost all of them, or maybe all of them, had animal protein in it, some sort of animal product in it. So that's 35,000 examples of conditioning against a 5-minute conversation about eating plant-based. It's hard. It seems like becoming vegan just was a shift overnight. It seems like it, because we're on the other side of it. It seems like It happened that fast. But to say that, I saw this documentary that made me vegan, or, I watched Dominion or Earthlings, or I had this conversation with this person that made me vegan, you're disregarding the complexity of your entire life experience. Every pet that you had or a friend had as a child, every positive animal interaction, every movie you watched as a kid, Dumbo and Bambi and Babe and, Charlotte's Web, all of those were part of it. All of it, that was all part of your journey of becoming vegan. And then it was the last thing was either Earthlings or a conversation or something. But this idea that we're going to do one thing, and one thing is going to get someone to go vegan is responsible for a lot of burnout and a lot of frustration amongst vegan activists. We have to understand where people are coming from if we're going to reach them. We can't just say they eat animals, they're bad. And hopefully if I tell them that they're bad enough, they'll switch. They're not going to listen to you, right? We have to, if we are not willing to objectively and honestly say, I'm going to listen to everything that you have to say. I'm not going to prejudge anything. And I will hear you. If we can't do that, why would they do that for us? And if we're only willing to criticize and ridicule, then our outreach and our activism is asking nothing of us.
That's it. That's a really interesting perspective, because right now there's a part of me that's in the anger stage of like, wake up, people, wake up. And this gives me a whole different perspective, which, definitely worth considering. Now, you've worked on some films that are about veganism and activism. And tell us about that, and then tell us about some projects that you have coming up. But before you do, I want to remind people who are listening in and not watching this that you're listening to the Vegan Visibility Show. This is Kathleen Gage, and I'm talking with Bobby Sudd from Los Angeles, who is just a phenomenal man who has done major changes in his own life as an example of what is possible. So let's talk about some of the films you've worked on, some of the causes you've been involved with, and then what's coming in the future for you.
Yeah, my vegan filmmaking career was I was sort of thrown into the fire, so to speak. After that first vigil, I talked with Sean, and he asked me to film that vigil, and I did. And I gave him the footage, Sean Monson, the director of Earthlings, and he asked me if I wanted to help him shoot his next movie. And so, of course, I said yes. And my very first day was at a beef slaughterhouse on the kill floor. And I remember before we go in, Sean looks at me and goes, "Hey, listen, poker face. All right, you need to have a poker face. You cannot show any emotion in there at all. All right," he's like, "we need to have as small a presence as possible. That's physically and emotionally." So he's like the whole day he's walking by me going, poker face, poker face. And yeah, I could talk about that experience. I don't know if I'll get through it without falling apart, but it was catastrophic. And I remember I gave Sean the footage and I told him, "Don't call me for like 3 weeks," which was the worst thing I could have done, right? To hold myself up in my apartment for 3 weeks, instead of, I should have called Sean and said, "Hey man, I'm struggling with this. Can I come over and just watch a movie or something?" But I didn't know what I was doing. So I was kind of trial by fire. And, from that day, we worked together for 3 years, going into slaughterhouses, going to factory farms. And yeah, it was an eye-opening experience, obviously. It certainly made me a better activist and able to deal with things a little better. I learned what to do, what not to do in terms of dealing with the psychological effects of being a frontline activist.
Right.
Yeah. So, I worked with Sean on 2 different projects. I worked with $1 Million Vegan. We did like 60 videos of plant-based athletes and doctors and talking about how going plant-based changed their life and changed their health. I just did a project with Moby, which will come out this month. So, yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So, you kind of happened upon it, and now you do so much of that. So besides the project with Moby, what are some other projects that you have coming up?
I'm working on publishing a book with my photography from vigils on Bearing Witness.
Wow.
I was at dinner with I don't want to name drop. I was at dinner with somebody, and I was telling them that I was thinking, this was right when the pandemic had started, and they were saying, "What are you doing now?" The vigils had stopped, and everything had come to a grinding halt. And I said, "Well, I'm thinking of maybe doing prints of some of my photos and selling them." And he looks at me and he goes, I love your photos, that, but I would never have them on my wall." And I totally get that. And so I asked him, "Well, what about a book?" And he said a book would work, So hopefully that will be out and published in 6 months or a year.
Nice.
So
Nice.
I think it could have a positive impact, I think.
Absolutely. And, I actually have been an author for many, many years, and it's amazing what a book can do. And especially right now, a book like what you're doing can have such in some ways, a negative impact on people's emotions, but then a positive impact overall. And what would you say, Bobby, for people like, okay, myself, I'm coming up on 3 years of being a vegan, and honestly, when I hear the stories you're telling, it brings up a lot of emotion for me. And I just think, what can I do? Because it hurts. And it hurts to see the ignorance of And in some cases, it's innocent ignorance that people have, and in other cases, it's blind ignorance that people have. But what can somebody like myself do to continue my activism? Because I do it through my podcast shows, I do it through blogging, through social media, but there's more. There has to be more. And where do we go to volunteer? Where do we go? So I'm seriously wanting to go deeper into what I can do to help, and then to educate other people on, here's something that you can do, because not everybody can go to the front lines. Not everybody can go in the slaughterhouses. Not everybody's equipped emotionally to handle something like that. Maybe it's just, changing the meals that they cook at home and educating, like when we have family and everything is plant-based. It's like, that's a rule. I will not cook anything that has animal or dairy. And people are often shocked at how good it tastes. So that's kind of one of my frontline efforts, but I'm seriously wanting to do more. So help me out here.
I think the best thing we can do is do what you're, whatever, everyone has a gift, everyone has a talent, everyone has something to offer the world and humanity, and use whatever that is for trying to move the needle forward for a vegan world. You don't have to be a frontline activist, but what you do have to do is be around non-vegans. A lot of, there's a lot of people that will say, I won't eat around people that aren't vegan, or I can't go home for the holidays because my family's not vegan. And being in an echo chamber doesn't help anybody. Preaching to the choir doesn't help anybody. It was like a year ago when Regan Russell died, the activist in Canada who was hit by the transport slaughter truck.
Yes.
And I remember we held a vigil right after that happened for her. And somebody asked me, how do I feel about it? And I remember telling them, I said, of course I'm angry. I didn't know her. But what I took away from this is, here's a woman who gave everything, who gave her life for animal activism. You can go and eat dinner with your family, even if they're not vegan. It's not asking that much, right? And have understanding that you were there once too.
Right.
And when you weren't vegan, you were certain you were right. And so they're not monsters. They're not terrible people. They're just, if you're an animal rights activist, don't have an enemy. You shouldn't have an enemy. No slaughterhouse worker should be your enemy. No slaughterhouse owner or farmer or butcher should be your enemy. They're all people you want to be vegan one day. Because if they're your enemy, what are they? They're just your loyal adversary. Because it's not as though you're going to kill them. You're not going to make them vanish. They're not going anywhere. Right? So they're here on this planet with you, and you can get them on your team, or you can just fight with each other.
That's a incredible perspective, and I appreciate that. And Bobby, how do people get in touch with you? Do you have a web address that they can go to look at your artwork? What's a way? Because I found you on Clubhouse, actually. I heard you in a room and was like, oh, I got to get this guy on my show.
Instagram at Bobby Sud is where I post all my photos and everything. Okay. You can also reach me on LA Animal Save's Instagram page, and on Facebook as Robert Sud.
Okay. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And, Bobby, I just want to say thank you. It's truly, truly an honor to have you on the show and to share your message, because you've actually given me some food for thought of, not being so harsh with people, because I was 64 when I went plant-based. And then I was moving into almost 65 when I identified as a vegan. So for me, it's like, I can't expect people to get it any sooner than I did, and maybe not even as soon as I did. So I really appreciate that perspective. I appreciate your kind heart and what you're doing for the animals and what you're doing for your health and the environment. So in closing, what are your final thoughts for people?
Have patience. Change never happens as fast as we want it to, no matter what change we want. And something I learned in changing my life, and I think this is true. This is true for whatever change you're trying to make. Have a love-based perspective. This is LA Animal Save. The Animal Save movement is a love-based movement, but I learned this from my brother. When I was overweight and I was trying to lose weight and I was failing over and over again with diets and things, that was all based on how much I hated myself. I hated the way I looked. I hated the way I felt. I hated my life. And I thought, maybe if I hate myself enough, I'll stick with this.
Wow.
And every time I went to the gym, it was a reminder of how much I hate myself. Every time I ate a meal, it was a reminder of how much I hate myself. And it never lasted. I got tired and I quit. And when I went plant-based with my brother, I made it about how much I love myself, how much I love what I'm doing for myself, how much I love my body, and how much I love treating it the way I always deserve to be treated. And I treat activism the same way. I can make it about how much I hate animal activism and people that hurt animals and they're destroying the planet and their health. But that's exhausting because every action I take will be a reminder of that. Or I can make it about how much I love animals. I can endure going to kill floors because it reminds me, this is how much I love them. This is how much I love what I'm doing for them. I can make it about how much I love the planet, helping others find their health and happiness again. And where hate is exhausting, love is empowering, and it's contagious, right? And I don't believe, and again, this is all just my opinion. This is none of, but I don't believe that we can hate enough to create a kind and compassionate world.
I love that. I love that. And that's probably what we'll call the episode. I can't hate enough to create a kind and compassionate world. So, Bobby, I truly, truly appreciate what you're doing. And I'm so grateful that I connected with you and definitely want to continue our conversation and build a friendship because you're doing the things that I know a lot of people aspire to accomplish. And thank you for what you're doing for the animals, for the health, and for the environment. This is Kathleen Gage with Vegan Visibility Podcast Show. Please leave a review and a rating and listen to other episodes. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show. Be sure to subscribe to get notified when the next episode is live. And we always appreciate reviews. Join us next time for more inspiration, education, and motivation to build your business one cruelty-free and healthy person at a time.